Hello, fangirls and fanboys. Welcome back to Random Fandom, the podcast that celebrates fan culture in all its glory. So, we are a couple of fangirls ourselves, living the fandom life. My name is Shiri, and with me is Chen. Hi, Chen.
Hi, Shiri.
Hi. So, we're gonna dive right into it, shall we? What's been happening in fan worlds? What's the news? What's going on?
Let's talk about what happened this past couple weeks. So, Funko, the very famous figurine label, especially for their product, the Funko Pops, opened the very first flag store in the state of Washington. It's called Funko HQ, and it's actually pretty interesting because for years now they've been selling their products through other retailers, but this is the very first store that is their store. And it's pretty cool. We will put a link so you guys can see. They've done a whole virtual tour in the store. They have special areas, kind of like themes. They call it worlds. They have the world of DC, like Gotham. They have Harry Potter world. And since they haven't been doing figurines alone for years now, there are tons of other merchandise carrying the famous pop characters, like t-shirts, keychains, bags, and stuff like that. If you love stores like Hot Topic or even, visiting studios and backlots, this is exactly the sort of place for you. And they have a lot of stuff planned. Stuff like they're gonna do workshops with different artists that they're gonna bring in. They're gonna do
That's exciting.
That is awesome. They don't know the plan just yet, but just you can assume people like sculpture, stuff like that. And they're gonna have a whole area dedicated to build your own pop. It's not ready just yet, but it's coming up. So if you're in Washington, definitely take a visit. And
it's a kind of a weird location, though.
I know. I thought so too.
Of all places, Washington is not exactly the hub of pop culture. I don't know. Maybe it is.
I think it might be like a West Coast.
Maybe they're just starting, and there will be one in LA where one assumes it makes more sense. Or a London one, I don't know.
I totally wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, and they kind of like brought on a lot of celebrities just before they opened the store, to kind of like and you saw people behind the scenes, like famous people with their own figurines. It was pretty cool. It's definitely like a nerd holiday sort of thing. And other than that, they had a massive week full of announcements because New York Comic Con is actually coming up early in October, and Funko always sells exclusive figurines during the conventions. So they just actually started revealing some of the stuff they will sell on Comic Con alone. Stuff like figurines from Game of Thrones, like a fan favorite, Lyanna Mormont. But they also exposed some DC stuff, and they're definitely not done with the reveals. And Comic-Con aside, they had really exciting announcements this week about other stuff in their line, such as Mad Max characters, some more Game of Thrones stuff, including, sort of spoiler alert, the Night King riding over the now deceased Viserion. Too soon, if you ask me. And some, honestly, it's cute, but it's kind of like, squeezing at your heart. And some Star Wars stuff, because The Last Jedi is coming out in December. I imagine we'll see a lot of Star Wars toys in the upcoming months. But this week, Disney and the robotics company Sparrow, they revealed a new character. It's probably going to be in the movie. It's some sort of like an evil twin for the cute robot, android, the BB-8. And it's very much like BB-8, but it's just dark.
Evil twin. So this is officially now a soap opera. Like, we're not even trying to. It's not.
Yeah,
he was in a coma, and then he woke up, and it was its own evil twin.
Yes, and at some point, his twin went undercover, pretending to be him, and Star Wars became Orphan Black. It's a whole crazy.
And you know how you know because of the mustache. One of them has a mustache, and the other doesn't, and that's how you know. Okay, so that's very exciting. I guess.
And Last Jedi coming out December 15th, so I'm sure we'll have more news about that in the next few months. a quick word about The Defenders, which premiered on Netflix August 18th. Mixed reviews, but what was interesting about it is that Netflix revealed at the end of August that Jessica Jones is their most watched Marvel show. No one was surprised.
Excellent news.
Yeah, let women lead shows. Good things come out when you do that. Okay, we wanted to just talk quickly about a couple of conventions that were this past weekend. It's apparently it's convention season.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. They're all the time.
It's always convention season somewhere in the world.
Yeah. There is even one coming up here in Israel pretty soon.
So, October?
Yep. Celebrating 20 years of Buffy, despite all the unfortunate events. ...
So I'm sure
and many more things.
I'm sure we'll hear more about the conventions October. You'll get to go to Icon in Israel. I get to go to New York City Comic Con. Will be some exciting stuff. But this past weekend we had Fan Expo in Canada, which is, I guess, their equivalent of Comic Con. It's the biggest, if I'm not mistaken, convention of the year in Canada. One of the cool things that was revealed during that convention was the trailer for the new Carmilla film that's going to come out at the end of August. And Carmilla...
Yeah, I don't know much about that. Yeah.
Carmilla is a whole exciting, people can do their thesis about the phenomenon that is Carmilla, because it started as a web show and got a lot of support from lesbian, bisexual fans, so the queer female fans, because it is about this, couple of girls, one of them is a vampire, and lesbian vampires, let's face it, are, always sell. They had a first season. They were a bit of an underdog. Then they were renewed for a second season with the sponsorship from, I think it was a tampon company. Very pro-feminist, they're very geeky. One of the characters have a mug of the TARDIS, and pretty sure Buffy was brought up at one point or another. And, they became pretty big, and I think, the queer fandom played a really big part in that, and now you can see them. They were in San Diego Comic-Con. They're coming to New York Comic-Con. It's a big deal. They're huge. And
so they started as a web series, and the fandom slowly grew and until it became this massive thing now.
I almost feel like the fandom made it a massive thing. You know what I mean? The evolution.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Who else but the
I know.
fans? I mean, the people who watch it, they are the one who is making
Absolutely. And more specifically, who else but the queer fans, because that's a force to be reckoned with. But so they filmed a feature, which is going to come out at the end of August, and they said they're going to reveal another longer trailer, their full trailer, during New York Comic Con, so that's exciting. And actually
For the movie?
For the movie.
Movie.
One came up.
Is there still a show, though? I'm sorry, I'm asking a ton of questions.
No,
Just
we've never spoken about
know
it.
anything
Yeah,
about
we've never spoken about it. That's great. I don't remember if they had...
the first I'm hearing of this.
I think they had 3 seasons, I believe, and a season 0, some sort of missing tapes that they were looking through at some point between seasons, which is super smart marketing wise. While the audience waits, there's this sub story, so that's super smart. And then when they wrapped the series, they announced that they're gonna do the movie, and of course everybody was super excited. And one of the cast members for the film is Dominique Provost-Chalkley, who is playing Waverly Earp on Wynonna Earp. So, everybody's even more excited, and her character, Wynonna, is gay, so it all wraps together beautifully. And
for the gay community.
And speaking about Wynonna and speaking about conventions, the other big convention this weekend was DragonCon in Atlanta, and the cast of Wynonna, which we've just spoken about last week, they were there. There's much to say about this, but I would only mention this thing. So, the website for they have their yearly Girl on Top competition to choose who was the woman of TV this year. And they're just...
Such a feminist way of putting it.
I know, Girl on Top. Yeah, well, I know.
Yes.
The Girl on Top.
I mean, for it's huge improvement, I guess. I don't know.
Well, here...
For Entertainment Week.
Well, E is actually not Entertainment Weekly.
Really? Okay.
I know. I had to research it this week. They're very similar. Super confusing. I know. Mind blown, right?
The more you know.
The more you know. Yeah, and knowing the cast of Wynonna Earp and the creators, they would probably take the name Girl on Top and turn it into a naughty joke. That's very on brand for them, which is part of why we love them. But what I was going to say about that is actually they're in the final round of that competition, and Melanie Scrofano, who plays Wynonna, is head-to-head with my love. They're both my loves, but Alicia Debnam-Carey, who played Lexa on The 100. And many things to say about this whole thing, but I just want to say that, first of all, I opted out of voting on this thing. It's blasphemy. I cannot choose between these two women, so, But the fact that Melanie has gotten so far this year shows that this was Wynonna's year and proves just how strong the queer fandom is. Because even though her character is not the queer character of the show, the queer fandom has been, championing this show and really pushing it forward. So they're always present when it comes the time to vote for stuff or donate for stuff, and that's just another proof. So either way, I'm so excited to see that, it's her year, and it's incredible.
It feels to me like the queer fans, they're always ready to fight for what they love. They never back away from the fight. They love their things, they want them to continue, they usually get cancelled or the characters die. They suffer a lot, but they're always ready to fight for it. They'll do massive campaigns to get their shows on the air. And that's amazing.
Absolutely.
And usually they succeed.
It's a bit of art imitates life. LGBT people are used to fight for what they want and what they deserve, and
yeah, that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah, translates. It translates, into fandom, which is fascinating. The last thing we wanted to mention today in this not so quick update was Hurricane Harvey, and talking from the fandom point of view, both the guys from Marvel, specifically from the set of the Avengers 4, and guys from the CW, kind of been gathering people and asking them to donate. It's just really nice to see in times of need that fandom can really be a force for good, and that people in a position of being able to influence are asking people to come together and join together to help in that way.
To help what? You didn't say.
With Hurricane Harvey, to basically donate to help the people who've been displaced. Yeah, and it's interesting because there are also specific charities like help LGBTQ people in Houston and help people of color in Houston. So it's been amazing to see people coming together. But it's always I always love seeing when actors know that they can
use their powers for good and not just for empty fame.
Absolutely,
so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a very strange couple of weeks in the world. Very tense. We've had floods all over the world, very, very big, catastrophical events. And these past few days, huge fires raging through LA. A lot of very hard stuff going on around the world. Our thoughts and prayers are with, people Absolutely. In those places right now.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's kind of a downer.
On that note... Yes,
let's shift gears. It's the same as the last show. We had to shift gears and kind of shake it off. And I was thinking, let's talk about something a little more fun, for me at least, and that's Good Omens. Okay, so guys, Good Omens is a fandom of the book Good Omens, which is kind of a comedy fantasy book from 1990. Written by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, two big names in fantasy writing. Neil Gaiman, of course, is the creator of Sandman, a very important comic book, and many books and stories, and he had movies made from his writing. A big fan favorite. And Terry Pratchett an amazing genius that I love so much. He wrote the Discworld series, which is a fantasy sort of series of books that has everything. It's not just fantasy, it's like everything. It's like a microcosmos of the human condition. And it's funny as hell, and I love it. Unfortunately, he passed away. So Good Omens is a book that has a big fandom base. It's been here a while, and like I said, from 1990. Instant fan favorite. People till this very day has a very strong internet presence, the fandom. It has a big slash OTP pairing that people just love. We'll talk about them in a second. So that's kind of, that always carries a fandom further, to have a good, strong, mostly slashy pairing. That book was based on an idea that Neil Gaiman had and wasn't really doing anything with it. Terry Pratchett heard about it from him, kind of loved it, kind of kept thinking about it. Eventually, very famously, he approached Gaiman and said, about this story that you told me about, are you doing anything with it? He said, not really. And Pratchett said, well, I think I know what happens next. So would you mind if I take it? Would you like me to buy it from you? Would you like to write it with me? And Gaiman wrote about this. I'm paraphrasing, but this is kind of the quote. And I immediately said yes to co-writing it because A, I'm not dumb, and B, that was the closest I'm ever gonna be to Michelangelo phoning in and saying, hey, would you like to paint a ceiling with me? So you can see that Neil Gaiman is a big fan of Pratchett. And they kind of wrote it together. It's very well documented how they did it. They used to send each other floppy disks, for God's sake. That was, if you guys know what that is, that means you're my age. And no emails, just back and forth. So they really wrote it together. It is an excellent book. I love it. I'm a big, huge fan of it. It has, again, so much in it. But basically, it's like the idea was the story of the Antichrist, the son of Satan, put on Earth as a child, as a baby. So it grows up on Earth and then brings on the end of days, eventually, as it grows up. But something goes wrong. There's like a mishap at the hospital, and he is instead being taken home by a very ordinary, straight English couple, and is raised in a very English sort of way. So this is kind of like the question of nature versus nurture. What will this Antichrist Adam become if he's just this boy who plays around with his friends, in the countryside, and he's not thinking big end of the worldy thoughts mostly. It has great cast of characters. It has witches and witch hunters, always close to my heart. Everything with witches I'm there for. And the four horsemen of the apocalypse are there. And death itself is, of course, there. A big character in Pratchett's lore. Death is always a good character that we all love there.
And for Gaiman too, right?
And for Gaiman too, yeah, absolutely right. I'm sorry, I'm just more of a Pratchett girl, so I wasn't even going there,
no,
but you're right.
Was this for Neil Gaiman? Was this his? I don't know the chronology of his career. I read a couple of his stuff. Was wondering if this was like his, in a way, a breakthrough for him to work with Pratchett or not.
No, he was already established by then. He was a well-known writer, but he was a little less established than Pratchett, I think, but only a little. He was coming off a very good run. He had no problem.
Okay.
Let's say that Pratchett knew him. They knew each other's work. They loved each other's work. It's not like took him out of the nothingness and made him a star.
Found him in the gutter.
From the gutters, exactly. He was his waiter, and he said, "I'm gonna make you a star." Was not like that. And like I said, it was his original idea in the beginning. So as you can already tell, quirky characters, it's a lot of fun. This is all comedy. And two major characters in it are the angel Aziraphale, and who got kicked out of heaven because he felt bad for Adam and Eve when they got kicked out. So he tried to help them, and then he got kicked out himself. And The demon Crawley also got kicked out of heaven. It was a whole thing. I'm not going to go into the details of the book. I just love it so much it's hard to stop. But these two, the angel and the demon, are two big leads and fan favorites, and their relationship is what the fans really love, and they're very important. Basically, they were on Earth since the beginning of time, since creation, and they kind of got used to it, you know? They kind of have their own niches in the world, and they're supposed to be enemies, but they kind of found themselves working together like two spies that are in the same world, and you know, the higher ups kind of forgot about them, so they live their life, and when it's like 5 minutes to the apocalypse, they're kind of looking around and saying, well, we don't really want this to stop, we kind of like it, and so they're trying to stop the end of days. Okay, so it's like a race against time with all these things coming together. And they don't have a sexual romantic relationship in the book, really, but we all know that they kind of do, so that's what the fans are focusing on. So let's just say that if there was a movie or a TV series, whoever got to play them, that's very important to the fandom.
It just so happens.
It just so happens, yeah, that, well, there was a talk about making a movie for very many years. Early 2000s, Terry Gilliam of Monty Python was supposed to direct them, and it was kind of a done deal, but then it never got made somehow. There was a script and there was money, but then there wasn't money, and there was this rumor that Johnny Depp and Robin Williams are going to play the angel and the demon. Like, what? I don't know. Thank God that never happened. You know, I just think they're wrong for it. So that didn't pan out. Neil Gaiman basically has such a bad track record with Hollywood. He doesn't believe that the movie is ever going to be made unless he's in the theater eating popcorn. That's Terry Pratchett quote. And Terry Pratchett about himself says, well, I don't believe that the movie is ever going to get made, period. They have very bad experiences. Oh, and there was like 2011, they talked about Terry Jones, another Monty Python guy. He was supposed to be writing something. That didn't pan out. And now, finally, because TV is what it is right now and everybody needs content, I suppose, Amazon, in January of this year, 2017, announced that they're going to make a 6-episode TV drama, Good Omens, which is amazing. And Terry Pratchett cannot make anything, as he is passed away, unfortunately. But Neil Gaiman is going to be at the helm of this. He's writing it, and I think he's going to be the showrunner, which makes me kind of angsty because I'm not sure that he is up for that job.
Interesting. I had no idea. I mean, I had no idea that he was going to write it, but being a showrunner, I don't know that he has that sort of experience. A showrunner is like the boss, so...
Yeah, I know. Maybe it's just a title like executive producer, which is strange that he would get that title, but we don't know. Maybe it's just his way of holding everything together.
On the other hand, it's his baby, so if anybody's going to be invested in the success of it, it's him. So, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
There's a lot of media interest. People are writing about it, and everywhere it says Neil Gaiman's Good Omens. And Neil Gaiman is getting very upset and angry about it. And he keeps tweeting about it, and he goes around saying, listen guys, that's not a Neil Gaiman's Good Omens. It's Pratchett and Gaiman. You can't separate those two. Just because he's gone doesn't mean he's not part of it. He's a huge part of it.
No, yeah, it's really interesting, especially now, like, I didn't know that history of that creation, but especially now when you're, with everything you said, it almost sounds like if Pratchett hadn't pushed for it to happen, it wouldn't have existed.
Yeah. Pratchett totally rescued it from being, like, just a figment of an imagination that kind of got lost in the, so many ideas are running around up there, I suppose. Those two are geniuses, They have a lot of ideas. He kind of latched onto that, and he started thinking, what is it going to be? And he made it into reality. You're right.
And Neil, I guess, is acknowledging that without Terry, that wouldn't have existed to become eventually a TV show. So seeing him being, not mentioned. I'm sure it's
very upsetting. It's upsetting to fans. It's upsetting to Rihanna Pratchett, who is the daughter of Terry Pratchett, and who is the executor of, all his creation and everything, all the rights to his work.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very, touchy about it. Obviously, it's her dad. He just died. She's feeling it. This huge project that that didn't pan out for so many years is finally happening. It makes sense that he would get the credit because he is one of the writers of the creation. That's just ridiculous that they just drop his name. So one last thing about that, 2 weeks ago there was an announcement by Amazon on the latest casting of those two very important characters, Aziraphale, the angel, and Crawley the demon, and they are going to be amazing. It's going to be Michael Sheen, who we know from Masters of Sex and Twilight and a million other things.
Woo!
And David Tennant.
Double woo.
I don't know who that guy is. Just some guy they picked up. He was their waiter.
I never know how David Tennant has the time. He's just been spotted, maybe sort of spoiler, but not really. He has been spotted on the set of, next season of Jessica Jones. And he's doing plays all the time.
God.
So
that's a spoiler. Why would you say that?
Because it's been publicized everywhere, as in because they're paparazzi on.
Maybe he was just visiting his friends.
Well, I will not.
Shut up.
Okay.
I
will not expand on that.
No
but
spoilers.
okay, yeah.
So he's busy. You're saying he's busy.
Anyways, he's super busy. I don't know how he finds the time to do more stuff, but yeah.
But I'm so glad that he does. They are both great stage actors, both famous for their Hamlet, amongst other things. And those are just two powerhouses. And
both played doctors.
And both played doctors. Listen, I think a lot of people play doctors.
Yes.
In the history of time. So that's not a lot of people played Hamlet too,
that's true.
So I guess that's not a big Anyway, it's very exciting. I'm very excited. Here's hoping it just keeps going well, and that eventually the end product is going to be well. At some point when back in 2011 when Terry Jones was writing it, there was he was saying things like, yeah, we kind of reworked it, we kind of changed things, but they like it. Gaiman and Pratchett approved of it. But me as a fan, I don't want you to change things. I don't want you to, I want it to be as close to the original as possible.
Then I'm sure you're torn now because, on the one hand, you're kind of iffy about Neil showrunning, but on the other hand, him as the writer probably means it would be closer to the original work.
I hope so. Personally, I'm more of a Pratchett fan. I've read a lot of Gaiman. He's very good, but I always feel like there's something kind of stark in his writing, something kind of unfeeling. He's always kind of telling the story from a very distant point of view. I don't know how to explain it. To me, it doesn't always work. Most of the world does not agree with me, which is fine. But I'm hoping for the best. I know that he's making it with respect. Mm-hmm. For Pratchett and for this work, and I love this story so much. It's such a good book. Everyone should just go read it. It's just brilliant. And there's the audiobook, also amazing. Stephen Briggs, who is most of the Discworld series, he done the audiobook for. He's doing that as well, and it's just good if you like audiobooks.
I mean, well, you know how I am with audiobooks, just the same as how I'm a hypocrite and cannot listen to podcasts, but you definitely got me excited to read. I mean, yes, I will say that I haven't read a lot of Gaiman, but one of the books I have read is American Gods. And actually, that also has been adapted in the past year to TV series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. It could be, actually, maybe that helped. Because American Gods, came out, it was doing what I think well.
Yeah.
Maybe that helped with Good Omens.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and you actually mentioned that the whole Antichrist thing. Of course, I didn't know because I don't know anything about Good Omens, like I mentioned. But it seems like Gaiman has also a fascination with the theme of gods and maybe faith. And I would say,
Lore.
yeah, I mean, I would say that American Gods is definitely worth a watch. It's so hard to describe, just like the book. And sometimes I wonder, it's not that I had a hard time with the book. I thought it was fascinating and definitely got me, to go and read a bit more about like Norse mythology and stuff like that, and expose you to a lot of like gods that you didn't know from different, times and different cultures, Russian gods and stuff like that. But the book felt a bit too long for me, and I think it might have been because I read like the author's cut.
Yeah.
That was, I think, the 10 years anniversary, which is like 100 pages longer than the original edition, which is a lot. So when I watched the TV show, and the TV show is actually I believe he's the showrunner, Brian Fuller, who we know from Wonderfalls and Pushing Daisies, of course, Hannibal, which I haven't seen Hannibal, but it's huge fandom. And like a slashy fandom as well. But Brian Fuller is the guy behind American Gods, and I watched the first season. It was an artistic masterpiece visually. I couldn't tell if a person who haven't read the book would understand eventually everything that's going on in the show, but the cast is amazing. You get even the guest appearances. Like you have Kristen Chenoweth, you have Gillian Anderson, and the series itself starring Ian McShane and Ricky Whittle, who was Lincoln on The 100. Of course, if I can talk about The 100, I will. That just naturally happens every now and then.
Ian McShane is a huge get. It's a good casting, is what I'm saying. That's good casting.
Absolutely. Yeah, he and Ricky are like, carrying the show on their shoulders and doing a beautiful job. It's not a long watch because, it's one of those short seasons. I would say if you love the book or if you love Gaiman's work, or I think a lot of things that bothered me about the book were maybe solved in the show, and in a way vice versa. So it's it's very weird. But if you love the book, or I think in general if you're interested in mythology, it's a great show to watch, even for the sheer joy of these performances by actors. Brilliant. Beautiful stuff.
Okay. Noted. Well, you mentioned you were reading the unabridged version of the book, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and it was very long. I always find that a bit tricky, the unabridged book, because I think mostly there's a good, especially with writers who are very well established, they're not just starting out and the editors do whatever they want. If you're like Neil Gaiman, if an editor edited your book, it's probably a good idea. He probably made it better. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're not like this ingenue, wide-eyed, don't know how to protect your work. Same thing, just reminded me of Stephen King. I was a huge fan of Stephen King when I was growing up, read everything I could get my hands on. He writes long-ass books. He just writes and writes. It just does not stop. And every one of his books comes out abridged. And then, well, not abridged. Comes out, edited. And then later on, like, I don't know, a year, 2 years, whatever years later, it comes out unabridged. Because he would not let go of a word that he wrote. And so something that is already 1,000 pages is now 1,500 pages, and who can read all that? And mostly it's just so tiring. And I loved him, I still do. I love his work, but I'm not always up for that.
I mean, I'm biased, obviously, because I'm a writer, and of course, naturally, I find that the hardest thing is, to drop, some of your text. I would say it's an interesting discussion because, I would say this version is the writer's equivalent of like a director's cut. Though with the film is like, a visual medium, so it's different. But as a reader, it's hard. Like, I remember when I tried to pick which version I wanted to read, you're like, okay, if you enjoy a book, you really want as much of it as possible. And there's also something to be said about, okay, this is in a way the writer's cut, so this is the closest to a vision, to his original vision. Kind of like you would want to read a book in the native language it was written, if you can.
True.
To really get the nuances. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because you're like, I feel like it can either be a huge hit. It's like a hit or miss. Like you don't really, it can be a terrible idea, add nothing to the book, change the reading experience. Like I was always curious, how would I feel like to read the original version of American Gods, if that shorter length would make for a better reading experience.
Yeah, now you'll never know. But here's the thing, the director's cut as well, not always a good idea. Mostly when you see deleted scenes, you can see it's a good thing that those are the deleted scenes. Mostly the deleted scenes are not like something you really, really miss. It's very rare that that's not the case, I think.
I mean, and then sometimes there's a third layer. Yeah, no, but
it's exactly the same as the first layer.
Yeah, true. No, but sometimes you see these scenes and you're like, how the hell did this scene not make it into the final cut? So I guess you never know.
Let me say this. This is something that I actually learned from Joss Whedon. It's gonna be such a problem now because it's all I talk about. So
I mean, I just remember that he's gonna do Batgirl this week, and I was like, am I gonna see this movie in the cinema? Like, what's gonna happen?
You will.
Maybe not in the cinema. Maybe I don't want to. I don't know. We have a while to think about it, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, you have time.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is another good thing that I've learned from Joss Whedon. He gave a very good advice, I thought, and it worked for me in writing and in a lot of other things that I did in life. Actually, in the commentary track of one of the Angel episodes, the one that they're at the ballet, do you remember that? Waiting in the Wings. Right, remember.
Vaguely.
Still a fan. I'm still a good fan. So, Waiting in the Wings, and he speaks about this whole episode about them going to watch a ballet performance. And he's talking about the fact that the whole idea came from this thing that he had in his head of how funny it would be if Wesley, played by the amazing Alexis Denisov, whom I love and adore and I want to marry.
He's already married to Alison Hannigan, so that's...
I know. He's already in the most perfect marriage in the world.
With the best Halloween costumes, yes.
Yeah, and the best kids. So... he's a goofball and he's a very funny guy, but on the show he doesn't get to show all his funny. So Joss Whedon had this idea in his head of Wesley fantasizing about doing ballet. He's watching the show and he's doing ballet, so that would give him an opportunity to put Alexis in tights and make him, do funny, goofy stuff on stage. So he wrote this entire episode for that. And then they were cutting the episode, and in the editing room, it wasn't working. He had to cut something, it wasn't working, there was no flow, there was no whatever. And he kept struggling, and finally had like a light bulb over his head type moment when he realized the thing that is holding back the entire flow is the scene that he's not letting go of Wesley dancing in his own fantasy, being goofy on stage in tights. So he had to cut it. And he did. And everything flowed and everything worked and it was what it was. And that's a very good lesson to learn, even though I was telling a very long story. It's a very good lesson that sometimes the scene that you're holding on to, and even if it's the scene that you wrote this whole thing for, is just holding you back. It's not relevant anymore. It's just one thing that's not working, and it's best to just cut it and leave it on the cutting room floor, and it works. And that is absolutely the truth, and I've learned it, and I've lived it, and whatever else, I've got this from Joss Whedon.
I mean, for me, it's still, again, as a writer, it's a struggle, but I'm trying to get better about it, and the more I work on TV and see other people who are writers and producers of their own show, for example, managing to kind of depart from that, something that was meaningful for them in the script. First of all, it's a lesson in being humble, and second of all, I'm like, if they can do it, then I can learn to do it with my own scripts. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just a balance. Protecting your vision and also knowing when to let it go for the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that. I guess.
That's that. Yeah.
What else?
Oh yeah, we wanted to talk about since we're a show about fandoms. Not that we pretend that we know everything there is to know or every fandom. We couldn't possibly.
No, there's so many.
There's so many fandoms and so many phenomenons that relate to fandoms. But one thing that I learned this past week is about the young adult literature fandom, which honestly, I might be completely ignorant, but I had no idea existed in such an organized manner.
Yeah.
Silly me. What was
It's very surprising. I was about to say that's such a broad term. How can you say that? It's like saying the children's book fandom. You can't say that. There's like a bajillion of them.
I mean, I know, but it's almost like
they're all different.
Yes, I wouldn't know if to call them a fandom or a community, but there's almost like they're this organized organism, in a lack of a better term.
Love it.
They have a lot of they have blogs, and it makes sense once you actually start researching it. You're like, oh, of course, because these people, these critics, these authors, this is their specialty. There's
their focus.
Right, there's an entire community. Obviously, young adult is not a genre. It's I don't even want to say that it's a style, but there's so many sub genres that you can kind of it's like an umbrella term in a way. So it's really interesting.
I think it's just a business term. It just it's easier to say
for marketing purposes. You mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. It's like saying the millennials.
Right.
It's just a term to bunch together of so many people that are so different from each other and have so much in common and not in common.
Right. But except it makes you think it's a technical thing, but then you realize holy shit, these people they're so passionate about it, because for many of them it's their livelihood and it's the thing they consume. And of course you don't have to be like an adolescent to consume young adult. Nowadays so many young adult books, this is where you see fantasy and sci-fi, the sort of thing that you later on really love on TV, and it's just the broadest and deepest worlds under this unrealistic genre, so to speak.
Which is why I'm saying it's just an industry term.
Yeah.
Someone gave it this name. Whatever.
And people have adopted this term. They now proudly, carry this term. And like I said, there are a lot of blogs about it, and it's a community. They refer to, I can't say they refer to themselves as community, because again, it's such a general thing, and you could say, I'm a young adult, I would read young adult work.
Yeah, me too.
But this past week, they just really, really showed and proved the power of fandom, and, we've spoken about the power of, social media in incredible ways, such as canceled shows, signing petitions. And so this last week, I would say specifically around August 27th, there was this whole big scandal on the internet, because there was this new book was supposed to come out. It's called The Handbook for Mortals. And what happened was, this book was supposed to be released and become #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, which is a huge deal, and we'll get to the technicalities of how you can even get to that spot in a minute. But the point was, the book that spent the last 25 weeks on the top of that list is The Hate You Give, which is such an important book, that kind of won the acclaim it won due to being really good and gathering a lot of readers. And it's this story about this black girl who saw her friend being shot by a police officer, and the way it affected her life and the life of the people around her and the community. So of course, and there's it's been adapted to a film that will come out at some point. So obviously this book means so much to so many people, and to have another book knock it out of that first place spot after 25 weeks had to be like something incredible and super anticipated. You know what I mean? Yeah, so
Out of nowhere.
out of nowhere comes this book that nobody heard about, that you cannot purchase on Barnes and Nobles, that is out of stock on Amazon, and people are like, did you hear about this book? Like, if you are gonna be released as a New York Times #1 bestseller and nobody heard about you, and you can't be purchased anywhere, that's a red flag. And so the incredible people well, I will mention 2 specific names. There is Kaylee Donaldson on Pajiba, who actually kind of like gathered together all the information that was, collected on Twitter. And on Twitter itself, you have Phil Semper, who is a young adult editor and blogger. And he was the first one to kind of like be like, something's not quite kosher about this whole thing. And it's incredible because he's done research. And what happened is when he started sharing his opinions, he's like, listen, this makes no sense. Nobody in the community heard about this book. I can't get it anywhere. Something is fishy here. And then people started to turn to him. And now let's stop for a second and talk about how technically you can, get into that list.
What does that mean when you just come out
Yeah.
of nowhere and just go straight to the top of the
It's
list?
hypothetically not supposed to be super difficult. You need to sell, a certain amount of copies, specifically 5,000 copies. And there are specific stores that are New York Times reporting stores. And that's how New York Times get their numbers. And apparently New York Times doesn't, maybe now it will change. They don't really check, But so what happens is, I guess the girl who wrote this book, apparently, for the purpose of getting it made into a film that she will also star in, mind you, they called these stores and basically did bulk orders. Now, that's not an illegal thing. They called, they asked, hey, are you a New York Times reporting store? And when they got a positive reply, they ordered like 100 books. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, at one store, someone said she called and said that she will be at Dragon Con, which is the convention we mentioned earlier, and that she needed 100 copies. But, like Kaylee wrote on her article on Pajiba, this author was not...
What for?
She wasn't scheduled to be a guest or a panelist on Dragon Con. So this whole thing, smells really fishy. They bought books just to get into the list, which, again, not technically illegal, but when it does happen...
But did they buy the books?
They
literally bought their own books?
They bought their own books to get into the list with apparently the intention of, being adapted into a film. Because it's much easier to become...
This is like buying your own album just to get the double platinum.
Yeah, that's basically it. Except, it's not uncommon, and it's usually done when it comes to nonfiction. And many people will bulk purchase their own book and then give it as promotional events as a present and whatnot. Except that when this is the case, New York Times usually puts a note next to it mentioning that that's the case. This is a bit of a whole new ballgame in the sense of this is a fiction book. Did not get that note on New York Times. New York Times didn't even know that that was the case. And everything behind it is completely fishy. And so you have that research online and the people on Twitter slowly starting to get reactions saying, I have another guy who works at this store that just told me via direct message that they got a phone call. Someone was asking if we're a New York Times reporting store, and a day later they made a bulk purchase of 200 copies. So, I think it was personal.
That's insane.
I know. First of all, it's crazy that it's this easy. And second of all...
It's so easy.
I know. Second of all, it's amazing.
Do I need to even write a book?
Oh my god. Listen, people were...
Submit my fan fiction?
But people were outraged because young adult is their passion and people work super hard. And The Hate You Give was a very socially important book. And to have this this whole thing that, again, not illegal, but a total scam, So it was just amazing how that very day, it happened on August 24th. The article was published on the 27th, and they keep updating it to this day because new details come out all the time about this crazy thing. And it's just amazing how within a few hours, the whole thing flipped over. New York Times were contacted. They got them off the list. So, and you're like, oh my god, the young adult... Right, the young adult fandom on Twitter almost like single-handedly, first of all, discovered the scam. Second of all, undid this scam. Like, justice prevailed is how many people reacted to it, which is totally, true. This is, like, both fascinating and upsetting in so many ways. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, like, people were like, oh, we checked the IMDb page for the upcoming film, and surprise, surprise, the author is she appears over there as the lead character. So she's like, she wrote the book so she can get the book into the New York Times bestseller list, so she can have the book adapted as a film, so she can star in the film. That's like, it would have been genius and impressive if it wasn't so, like, I don't know, iffy.
Insidious?
Yeah.
And what about her? Does she have anything to say for herself? Is she reacting at all?
I don't think she herself spoken a lot of, like, oh, I didn't...
Was she approached at all?
I don't think so. Not that I've seen. And if she did, she kind of, like, didn't say... Well, I really wonder where they will go from here. But, to make matters even worse, it appears that the cover of the book was supposed to be like an homage to another artist's work. Like, it looks like a copy with, adjustments. And the artist, not of the original of the cover, was like, wait, what? Like, I was asked to do a homage to this artist. I was promised that he will be credited. I have no idea what's going on.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy. And the original artist was contacted and said, I was never asked for permission.
Never contacted.
I have no idea.
Crazy.
I know, it's like every single nuance about this is totally messed up. You couldn't be more of an asshole, it seems. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
You could.
I guess, okay, you could. You can always be Trump, but,
Exactly.
Right, but, above all, I'm just in awe of the young adult fandom, and just, this is such an exhibition of power and, like, coming together in a way to kind of, like, be like, hey, this person was looking for shortcuts at our expense, and we won't have it, especially since, people worked hard to genuinely get to that spot. People with stories about their lives and whatnot. This person just decided, it's always kind of like, it always rubs me the wrong way when there is a sense of entitlement there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I haven't seen any experts from the book or anything. Like, I would say that I don't know anything about the book or the quality of the writing. I know there was some people saying that it was like a rip-off of a fanfic, and then the fanfic writer of like a famous...
Oh my god.
I know, you'll have to read the whole thing. We'll definitely put the link for people who can go and read it. This is fascinating, and the more you read, the more...
Wait, I just want to know, about the fanfic. What does the writer of the fanfic says? Fanfic of what fandom?
Well... I don't even know. If you want, it will take me just a second.
Yeah, go look. That's important to me.
Right, so...
This just makes me remember, all of a sudden, the origin of 50 Shades of Grey.
I know.
Of Twilight. And how 50 Shades of Grey, which is a piece of shit writing, became a huge thing based on nothing. Could it have been the same thing?
I mean, that's empty. The thing. One of the things I always say about, like, the most amazing things about how fandom is changing is that people who write fan fiction are being viewed as, like, real authors, or at the very least get real opportunities at publishing. Mm-hmm. It has its pros and it has its cons. And, like, when... how, of all fan fiction out there, how the hell did 50 Shades of Grey, you know what I mean? Made it. So, yeah. It's something I use in...
I have theories. I have many things to say about that.
Rubbing my chin surreptitiously. Yes, but...
This needs a whole show. I have many things to say about fanfiction, and fanfiction being suddenly, sipping into the mainstream, and the pros, and the cons, and all the beautiful things, and all the horrible things. But not for now.
And women who write fiction about fan fiction writer like Rainbow Rowell. Absolutely, yes, we will. I think
all of that.
Yeah, we definitely have to do a fan fiction show. We both write fan fiction, so we can definitely talk about it for hours and hours.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the girl, you might know better than I do. She says her name is Tara. She wrote an infamous fanfic called My Immortal.
Oh, of course.
Which people... Yeah, I don't... Which fandom is that, by the way?
My Immortal is a very famous Harry Potter fic.
That I guess was on fanfiction.net for a while. She basically just came forward to say, I am not the person behind...
Don't associate me.
It's just amazing how every aspect of it, you have fanfiction writers, artists, young adult. That thing goes so deep. It's like crazy. Fascinating stuff, and also perfect example, yeah, of how internet plays such an integral role. Will bring you up and will tear you down. Fandoms are definitely a very powerful thing.
Okay, so that's a huge,
interesting,
very exciting thing to me. That I love that. That's what I love about fandoms, the power of the community. Mm-hmm. And because people do the things they do with such passion for the things they love, for those books, those TV shows. Which is why I love talking to people about their fandoms.
I mean, this is a perfect example of you think you can come to our fandom and stir some shit? You know?
In our backyard? No. It's not even a fandom, but it's important enough to enough people that are playing in this playground.
Yeah.
I was thinking we are struggling to identify or to give a name to what it is that could be. It's not exactly a fandom, the young adult community, the world of because it's so big, we don't know exactly what to call it. But it does remind me of the romance novels community. There's a huge market in the world for romance novels. The bodice rippers, those historical romances, those modern, more overtly erotic books. And that's been going on for many, many years. And it was already a huge community in the 80s. Before there was internet, they had conventions that were the biggest, bigger than any convention we know. You know what? I bet if we look, we will find what are the conventions that's going on right now in that world. Those best-selling authors are sitting there. They're giving autographs. They're doing everything that they do in Comic-Con. But these are around that world of the romance novels. And much like, those geeky little things that we do, that was not always, or I think even this day, that's not as accepted. That's still considered shameful. If you're reading that sort of smutty books that says something about you, you're kind of pathetic. It's for women. The fact of the businesses, it was always deemed less, even though it had the greatest selling power. It was never something that was taken seriously because it's for women. Women write this. Women read this. By the way, same thing with fan fiction. Almost 100% women writing and reading. Another reason why it is looked upon as something shameful and kind of silly and kind of something that you're wasting your time on. It's all the same thing. Maybe they even have these similar, places where those two things meet. I'm talking about the romance novels world and the young adult.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, and a big part of young adult is invested in romance, age, and because love is what I think we care about. I don't know the most, but definitely deeply. So it does make a lot of sense. And speaking of also sex, of course, sex sells. So speaking of stuff that we love and sex, I'm kidding. Let's conclude today's show with a couple of recommendations. I wanted to say a few words about The Tick, which premiered on Amazon Prime this year on August 25th. It's the first half of the season. It's only 6 episodes. They're very short, it's 30 minutes each. It's completely fun and silly. I finished it in one sit down because it's so just easy to watch. Not a lot of time, technically, just doesn't take long. I don't know much about the past of the character, which I think you'll have a couple of words to say about, but I would say that the people that are involved here are David Fury, he's both a producer and a writer, Jose Molina, who wrote for my beloved deceased Agent Carter. I miss it so much. And the incredible cast, I will just mention my 2 favorites. It's Alan Tudyk, whom these hosts of these podcasts really love this man. And Yara
Yes.
Martinez, who I love. She's on. She's playing Louisa on Jane the Virgin. Won 50% of one of the best ships ever. The greatest love story ever told, if you ask them. She spoke just a bit about her role in the Tick. It seems like she was something that she was a bit afraid of doing, and she did in an excellent way. So much fun. Second half of the season supposed to come out early 2018.
So what I can tell you about the Tick is, well, there was first there was it was a comic series, very cultish. Can you say cultish? It was a cult phenomenon. And later on, it was a very short-lived TV series already. In 2001, it had only one series, and the guy behind the Tick is Ben Edlund, who is a very big guy in the Whedon world.
Do enlighten me. I had no idea.
By the way, he later got kind of kidnapped into the Whedon factory. He was a producer and a writer of Angel. He wrote some of the greatest episodes, such as Smile Time.
Oh my god.
And he was a producer and writer for Firefly. And he went on and he worked on Supernatural.
Oh my god, how did I miss all of this? That explains David Freer's involvement and Alan Tudyk's involvement.
Exactly. And that's how it all works together. They carry on together to other projects. So the Tick has a long history of being a fandom. I remember how people used to talk about the Tick, the series. Big geek love fest over there. Very, very heartbroken that it got cancelled. It's supposed to be an amazing show. I have not watched it, but I know a bit about it. Yeah, actually, that's all I have for you. I'm not a big expert on it, so if I got something wrong, please excuse me. But that's just what I know from general, my general knowledge of it. My general knowledge of things is basically, how is this relating to a show of Whedon that I love? And that's how.
That's how. Pretty much the same. It's like, 50 degrees from Whedon or something like that. But
exactly.
Yeah, again, just speaking from the point of view of someone who only seen these episodes, I won't be surprised if we'll hear about a renewal, especially like with New York Comic Con coming up. And it's a show that's actually shooting in New York, and I have a soft spot for shows that shoot in New York, obviously.
Because you can be on them.
Because I can be on them if they want me to. So
who wouldn't want you?
Highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. Looking forward to see, what happens next. And my other recommendation for today, which is a show that's very dear to my heart, The Bold Type, which has its season finale on September 5th. Awesome cast, super feminist. It's one of these shows, it's like, they kinda, under the disguise of like a Sex and the City-esque show, like a show that happens, technically the setting is a fashion magazine, but, like I told people, do not watch the trailer for this show. It does not do it justice. It feels like it should be a guilty pleasure, but it's not. One of the episodes, they talk about breast cancer and the importance of, early
detection.
Yeah, and they talk a lot about female sexuality in a way that's new and refreshing and unshameful. And I think one of the best things about the show, and of course something fans, especially us queer fans, really rally behind, is a new ship, Kat and Adina. That we have like 2 women of color, one of them is Muslim, in a relationship with one another, and that alone is a reason to watch this show.
Already in a relationship, you say? Okay. And one of them is Muslim. Oh,
well,
right.
They start the show not in a relationship, so you actually see, they're like kind of like
I like
flirting,
that better.
the stages of like flirting and self-discovery.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, because one of them was. Listen, absolutely. One of them was only with guys before she met that like really exciting, fascinating woman with super cultural background and whatnot. So it's been a lovely journey. Cast is amazing. Katie Stevens, who was on Faking It, another show that has a lot of LGBTQ following, and Isha D, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, who was in the awesome Sweet Vicious. We'll talk about Sweet Vicious at some point because you would love it. So, everything about this show is awesome, awesome, awesome. highly recommend it. I'm not even getting into, details about the rest of the cast.
We don't have time.
We don't have the time, but watch it because it's amazing, and trust me, because I know stuff. Yes.
What's the fat people situation, really quickly?
Here I will say this. I watched the last episode. I didn't see anyone, but I feel like ever since we talked about it on our first episode, I'm watching in a more informed way shows, which is very important, actually. So I'll definitely pay attention to this more.
Okay, because I'm keeping a list.
Yeah.
I'm checking.
I know. You're like Arya Stark list.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think thus concludes our show. But we wanted to say that you can now download us and follow us everywhere.
Yeah, freaking
Almost
everywhere.
Yeah, we're on YouTube.
Yeah, yes, you can watch on YouTube. How fun is that? Just let it play in the background.
Absolutely. On YouTube, on iTunes. If, we would very much appreciate your reviews and your votes. Because popularity is how things gets done.
Yeah, rate and review.
Yeah, and of course SoundCloud, and we're also now on Tumblr, we are on Blueberry, we're everywhere. So yes, download, listen at your leisure, whatever. Feedbacks are awesome.
We would love to hear from you, and if there's some information that we got a little mangled, if we didn't get the full story, if there's something you want to tell us about your fandom that we kind of went through really quickly and wasn't enough for you because you wanted to delve deeper, we would love to hear about it. That's what we are here for. There is no way in the world that we can know everything there is to know about each and every fandom. We're just dipping our toes into a lot of things, so please do come forward. Leave us notes. You can leave us on Facebook. You can write us to witch.fm666@gmail.com. You can leave us comments on SoundCloud, on iTunes, where the hell ever. And of course, we have a Tumblr, Random Fandom Podcast.
Yes, which means you can send us messages on Tumblr, and obviously you can find both of us on Twitter. Feel free, if you have, if you feel like your fandom is underrepresented in the media, if not many people know about it, but you love it and you want more people to know about it,
let us know.
Yeah, we want to hear about you. We want to hear about your fandom and, the thing you're passionate about. We
want to know about all the fandoms. So help us do that. And that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. Bye, Chen. Thank you.
Bye.